Hello, and welcome to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. First up, I just want to give you a language warning, right? Before we start. And today we're going to be talking about representation through language. We've had a few episodes about representation, and I think it's going to flow through very nicely. So, son of a bitch, motherfucker, slut, whore, man up, don't be such a girl. Have you ever stopped to think about what those insults are actually saying? Now, those insults are used against men and women, but the contents of all of them is about insulting a man and the comparison of a man, rather, to a woman, right? And then using that as an insult. So, with that space, the son of a bitch and the motherfucker, they're used very openly as insults to people. And they both surround the whole woman aspect. And when you look across the whole of our social context, there's more. There's like, man up, don't be a girl, you're a pussy, like so many of those things. And for those of you who don't like language, I'll slow down on that from this point on. But I needed to use it at the start because I needed to show how impactful this kind of language is in the way that it's used. And look, sometimes it's used from men towards men. Not denying that. Sometimes it's used from men towards women or women towards men. However, it's actually used, it doesn't take away the fact that it's actually using a comparison of men to women as the insult, right? You look also at sexual activity. A man's sexual activity increases his social status generally. Now, I'm talking about these in general contexts as well, right? I've not talking about the few people that are around that actually see life in the same way as what I do, because majority of people don't. And I get that, and that's just the way it is. But generally within a societal context, a man's increased sexual activity is actually seen as something that increases his social status. Whereas a woman, it decreases hers, right? And none of us invented these expressions. We've actually inherited them over time. And that's kind of the premise, right? Because if representation matters, because repeatedly seeing something, hearing something influences what feels normal to us, then hearing in that space is doing that same thing, right? So if we see something all the time and it desensitizes or it normalizes something to us, if we see, someone being kind all the time and they're elevated in as a celebrity, then that representation is going to be cool. I'm a kind person. I've got value too. We talked about in these other episodes as well, people in wheelchairs, people in other disadvantaged spaces, having representation in really big viewing ways has an impact. And so with that, what we're repeatedly seeing influences what feels normal, then what we are repeatedly hearing does the same thing. And this then imprints into our subconscious, right, and creates schemas. It primes us, that whole repetition thing. Repetition is the mother of all skill. Whenever you want to learn something, you repeat it. The brain actually uses it to change the neural pathways on the way that it sees things. And that can be our physical activity and also our mental activity and our belief systems and the way that we think. Now, we're all programmed with biases of some kind of level. Even people that do all the subconscious work, right, still have subconscious priming, and we all have schemas. And a schema is like a shortcut that the brain makes so that it doesn't have to have that extra processing power. So our brains, although they are fabulous, they're also not so fabulous in a lot of areas as well, right? So the brain is designed to make the quickest decision in the best way possible. So for example, if you're looking to hire a tradesman to come to your house, chances are you would go on a Google review and have a look at the Google reviews. Now, people pay for Google reviews, people entice and reward for Google reviews. The best way of getting some understanding is finding someone who's used their service and actually getting input from them, right? But that is a longer process. And so the brain will actually go, oh, here, I know we can do this. And then as soon as it sees a couple of good reviews, it goes, yeah, cool, let's go ahead, let's make a decision. And so the language doesn't magically just program us, right, for doing something that's violent or doing something that's evil or doing something that's disgusting. However, it does contribute to the cultural environment, right, that we're actually being and having developed around us. And it then develops the social associations and expectations and standards that are set from people at a societal level, what people think is behavior that should be called out and what people think is behavior that's just kind of normal. We've always done it that way, that kind of thing. And so looking more at those insults areas around women, right? The insults directed towards men, like I said before, the son of a B, the mother effer, the pussy, don't be a girl, grow some balls, man up, all that sort of stuff, right? So that, as well as the whole sexualization aspect. I mean, even, a man sleeps with a lot of women socially, generally. I'm not saying by everyone, it's like double thumbs up. He must be a stud or he's desirable. A woman sleeps with a lot of men, or she mustn't have any self-control, right? She must be easy, promiscuous. A man sleeps with a man, that's also at a societal level by many people not seen to be great. And so, that's used as an insult as well. Oh, you're gay, when they're actually putting them down. And so that is where our cultural hierarchy sits, right? Unfortunately, if you sleep with a man, it's not a good thing. If you sleep with many of them, right? If you're a man or a woman, it's just not seen to be there. And that lowers our value, right, at a societal level. And so what does that tell us then about the cultural hierarchy embedded in our language? you know the language that is used can be contradictory as well, right? So when a man sleeps with a woman, it's like he effed her, right? He had her, he scored her. Whereas when we're referring to women, it's she got effed, she got hit on, she got this, right? So it's like the man is actually achieving something and the woman is actually being resulted in something, right? And how that actually then is used as well in the language for humiliation, right? Oh, we got screwed, or they effed us, or we got effed over, or whatever it might be, right? So again, if you compare those things, one, I effed them over, or we got effed over. Generally, when you're looking at men, it's they effed her. And when it's women, she got effed, right? And so that opens that deeper question around why domination and sexual penetration, why has that become linguistically entwined in the space? And it comes down to misogyny, and everyone has some level of misogyny because it has been part of our patriarchal system for so long. Even feminists have some element of misogyny at some point in their lives, right? And it's internalized misogyny. Now, I'm working really hard on my internalized misogyny, but sometimes I still find it pop through and I need to process it. I know that when I was a child, very heavily were sitting in a lot of internal misogyny, serving the men around me, caring for that sort of stuff, doing the woman chores around the house, all of those sorts of things. I mean, at one point, my dad had a career in the merchant navy. So he worked on oil tankers and cargo ships and those sorts of things. And I actually said that I'd love to follow his footsteps and go and do that kind of work. And he blatantly said, no, women don't go to sea. It causes too many issues. A woman being on the ship, so this is his mentality, a woman on the ship then causes issues. Why does it cause issues? Because men couldn't control themselves, right? So men would be inappropriate. So it leads to, in his mind at the time, potential allegations of stuff that's happened, which now I realize probably did happen. It also would cause conflict with marriages because sometimes you're away for 3 months at that point in time. And so, sometimes the wives might be I can't think of the word now, not sure about their husband spending that much time with another woman, right? And so this misogyny was embedded into me from a very young age. And sometimes misogyny doesn't tell women they're useless. It just sometimes tells them that they're absolutely wonderful, right? At precisely the things that society wants them to do. So we are wonderful at planning and doing those things around the house, but not necessarily strategy that's needed for big corporations, right? We are great at household budgeting and making sure all the bills are paid on time and all the savings are there for holidays and those sorts of things, but maybe not historically to be in finance and to run finance companies and finance departments. Maybe women are really great at family schedules, making sure that all the doctor's appointments are booked in, that the kids get to their sports, or that the other family members get into their sporting arrangements, are really good at planning around the holidays and maybe giving itineraries and those sorts of things. But they're not really suited to operations, right? That's really just a man's role. Even resolving family conflict, they're usually the one that everyone in the family goes to when there's a problem, and they're sorting out arguments of here and here and allocating time on different aspects that someone's fighting over a resource, or setting up different structures within the family to resolve the conflict. But yeah, I don't know if they'd be any good for organizational leadership, right? Can you see the contradiction here? So raising children, but not historically running institutions, supporting people's emotions, but there's probably going to be a weakness when they're in leadership. Like, not the fact that they're actually probably going to be empathetic to the people around them and mentor them and build the best out of them. So the capability of a woman isn't different at this point, but the perception of where those capabilities fit better is basically what misogyny is kind of drawn from, right? And based on, because ultimately it serves the patriarchy, and it has for a long, long time. Yes, we're shifting it, but I'm talking about the underlying stuff that we're still trying to shake off now, right? So with that patriarchal system, it needed that unpaid resource to be in the home doing all the things, because that then allowed the man to go out and build the career. That allowed him to work the hours he needed to work, to go and achieve what he needed to achieve. And now that women are wanting to do that same thing, it's creating an issue. Now, also, what we're looking at is a space where women are very, very capable, and we've had to be capable. The way that in traditional senses, the differences between women and men in the way that they're raised is chalk and cheese from generations past. Again, I know it's changing, and slowly this is why people do this kind of education, so that as we're raising our own children, we can go, hang on, that doesn't actually fit right. Or as we're going into relationships, for me, especially as an older woman, I'm like, yeah, no. I mean, one of the things I say is, I will never be a wife again. And in that dating scene, when I'm communicating with people, I'm like, what are you looking for? Because if you're looking for a wife, I'm out. I'm not going to be the one. I mean, I worked and I brought in the main income for the house. We both brought in income. We both shared some of the duties, but I took on the main income provider and the main household support system and project manager. I was also project managing or property managing a property that we had, an investment property as well. All of that fell on my shoulders. And at the time I did that. But now that I don't have to do it, I'm kind of like, why would I choose to do that again? Why would I choose to project manage the life of another adult? Yeah, no, that's not for me. Now, some people love it and good on them, but the whole aspect of where we've sat in the past, yes, it is changing, but it's still got some underlying sentiment there. And there are a lot of men that straight out will go, okay, and then I get unmatched straight away when I say that. Because there are a lot of men that were conditioned growing up to be cared for and looked after by the women in the house. And there are a lot of women that, as they were raised and they were brought up, were conditioned to care for the men in their house. And, there's still instances now where you see some women will go and get the plates of food for their husbands and take them to them. That whole conditioning around serving the man and the men within the home in the way that you did it. And so where the compliment comes in for women is a lot around the instruction of what they're doing. And sometimes that can be conflicting as well, right? So women are naturally nurturing. So they should care about things and they should do all those things. They're better at organising, so they should do the organising. Oh, they're way better with children. They've got this maternal instinct. So, they should be the primary caregiver of the child. And So the positive stereotype that's given to women, it can still be restricting, right? Because that positive stereotype is embracing and championing them to fit into one particular role instead of looking at those skills being transferable across many, many different roles that we can do. And as women are starting to now have access to the world. I mean, it was only a couple of years before I was born that a woman could have her own bank account, right? So this generation has their own bank account, can hold a mortgage without a male cosigner, can go to university, can run their own business. All of those sorts of things that allow independence for women and have a job as well is changing the scope of the way that women are showing up. And this is actually something that's really alerting as well, because we've never actually provided an environment where we've nurtured men the same as what we've nurtured women. And we're starting to see that in the results at a societal level. So there's more women completing university degrees. There's more women, single women with home ownership than there are single men. And so this shift isn't because men aren't capable. In my opinion, it's because they haven't been nurtured in the same way as women to have to show up in the particular ways that you show up in order to have the skills and the discipline to be able to do things like university degrees and home ownership. Now, that's not saying that men don't do that. Of course they do. There are men out there that have university degrees. There are men out there that have their own homes, the single men. But what we're seeing is that shift in the way that that's happening. And that's creating a real angst amongst a lot of the people that have a high level of external and internal misogyny, because it just doesn't feel right, right? It's messing with the way of their brain structure. That schema should be, she should be going to work. You know, I had a conversation with someone the other day within my research. So I'm doing research on gender bias, and one of the scenes that came up was a job that a woman didn't get, right? And some comments around what if she has a baby, which 5, 10 years ago I was in HR. It was very common conversation at the table, even though it shouldn't have been. And so when, you know, that scene came through, I went, that's really interesting, because more and more women these days are actually choosing not to have children, right? So that mindset, that's the schema. When a woman goes in for a role, especially a young woman in the young 20s, the first thing that can pop in from the misogyny is, oh, she's going to want children and that's going to impact the business. Now, a man may want to be a stay-at-home dad when their family has children. That's not what pops into the mind, right? That woman may not even have children at all. That's not what pops into the mind. And so this is how misogyny is sitting in that underlying creator of biases at a gender level for everyone. And that's why I'm really interested in seeing how my research plays out, right? So again, with the aspect of, you know, women should be attractive and should present themselves well, we should smile more, all those sorts of things, but don't be slutty, don't lead a man on, right? We need to be confident and show up in the world, but don't be bossy, don't tell people what to do. Even intelligence, you know, my intelligence sometimes with some people has been quite intimidating, because I'm asking questions that are a little bit deeper than they used to. And they're like, oh, hang on, you're making me think deep about myself. Oh, no, I don't want to go there. Or even about their belief systems of the world around them. You know, that contradicts some of their values. And so I'll query and go, oh, this is your value, but that's what the political party you follow. I don't understand. Can you give me more info? And they're like, oh, yeah, okay. It was just the priming that I've received from the algorithms, from the media, whatever, that led me to believe that. But yeah, now you say that actually doesn't align with me. You know, we're taught to speak up and have more voices and speak out about things, but then don't be too difficult, right? Be independent, but don't be selfish. Be nurturing, but don't let your motherhood interfere with work. And even I've been guilty of this as well. I was delivering a program a few years ago, and one of the participants, it was a male participant, said, oh, I need to leave work early. I need to go pick up my kids. And I caught myself in my head. I'm like, what a good dad. Now, if one of the women participants had said, I need to leave early to pick up my kids, I would have gone, oh, okay, as an expectation, right? That's the internalized misogyny coming through. That even as I would like to say that I am growing even more and more every day into more feminism, and I would like to think that I have more feminist tendencies now than when I was younger and I didn't understand the differences. And feminism isn't just about promoting women, right? Feminism benefits everyone, because feminism is about pretty much reducing some of the impact of the patriarchy, reducing some of the impact of the misogyny. And that benefits not just women, but that benefits all minority groups. And for people such as men that sit very strongly in the patriarchy, that can be really confronting because whether they realize it or not, they have had privilege. Being predominantly white men have a privilege. They are respected by other men. You know, no one's supported by, no one supports a man like another man, right? Even, you know, there's a case at the moment with the Sydney Swans have had an allegation of sexual assault across against them, some of their players, and the men in the comments offering support to them, worried about the football, what their careers are going to look like, and not actually even taking into account that there could be women out there that have their whole lives ruined over this. But we don't want to ruin that guy's sporting career, right? Men worship men. And so when that privilege is taken away, then they can start feeling oppressed and start thinking, well, this isn't fair. Like I can't compete with them on an even keel. This isn't conscious, this is subconscious, right? If I compete with them on an even keel, I don't have the skills and the knowledge because I've never had to have them. I wasn't nurtured and raised in a way where I need to have what a woman has or what an Aboriginal person has or what another migrant has because they've done it tough and they've had to learn through and build resilience and take different steps. So they've learned different ways to approach things. Mine's always worked because I've just been supported in that. And so there's this real big requirement at a societal level of needing the traditional man to step up. And a lot of them aren't happy about it. I've seen in a lot of threads, you know, that women's standards are way too high and, you know, they need to be more of these caregiver, nurturer, all of those traditional aspects. And it's okay, I'll just go get a robot, right? With the new robots that are coming out, look like women and can perform sexually like women. So I'll just get a robot. And I'm kind of like in my head, good, do that. Does that mean then we can supply robots to all these men to stop women from getting sexually assaulted? Because if it is, start a GoFundMe. I'll put money into it. Right? But that's not going to solve the problem because that's just one element of where they've benefited from. A lot of men, a lot of marriages, and a lot of women in marriages had the idea that they were expected to give sexual favors or perform sexually for their husband because they were married. And the, you know, marital rape wasn't a thing before the 70s, I believe. You can fact check me on that date. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it was around the 70s. So before that, a woman couldn't even call out her husband for that, right? He was entitled to her body as well as her services. So yeah, these sorts of languages, because they're sticking around in the language element, even though we're shifting as a society and we're shifting our placement and women can go and get jobs, and there's many women CEOs, and I sit as on the chair of many boards, one in a male gate-kept industry as well. You know, so yes, women are having more opportunities now because of the feminist movement. We can wear pants, we can have bank accounts, we can go to university, we can do all these things, which is absolutely awesome. But this terminology that's hung around for all these years still creates more implicit bias. So we're tackling this explicit bias, the bias you can see, the sexism you can see, but it's still sitting internal. And that's where we need to move if we're going to continue shaping and changing and becoming a better culture, better society. And so, you know, there's also language that minimizes things, right? So moving into intimate partner violence or sexual violence, right? Oh, he snapped. He lost control. Or it was a crime of passion. This is all stuff you can see in the radio, or and even in the news, printed media, video media, and audio media, right? You can hear all these things. Even if we go back to the Sydney Swans aspect, the CEO said, oh, it's unfortunate they found themselves in this situation of this incident, right? No, it's an alleged sexual assault accusation that is being investigated. They didn't find themselves there. It's not like they just someone magicked a wand and they were just like, oh, I'm in the middle of this situation, right? They took conscious steps of where they were and what happened. Now, it is all alleged at the moment and whatever comes out, but I'm using that as an example because this is what happens in other things as well. There's been many other cases where there's been an allegation of sexual assault or any type of violence. And this is the way that the media portrays it. They use this minimizing language, right? Even when it's been confirmed and they've been convicted as being guilty for these things, they still use the minimizing language. You know, it's a domestic dispute. Even the word domestic, right? Domestic violence. It is designed to prime you to go, oh, it's not that major because it's domestic. It happens in the house. I don't have to have the same thought patterns on that. And that's why I like to say intimate partner violence, right? Because it's still violence, it's still one-on-one. And even, you know, if a man hits another man, that's seen as the man hit the man. Whereas a lot of the times it'll be, oh, what did she do to deserve it? Oh, did he really hit her, or did he just slap her? Did he just, you know, touch her up a bit? Like, all the words and terminology to desensitize is just crazy. And even looking at, you know, when these allegations come, it's like, you know, do they say, oh, a man assaulted a woman in these allegations? No, no, no. They say a woman was assaulted. So then they're even taking the man out of the focal point. And although consciously we don't recognize this, subconsciously that's embedding, oh, it's a woman problem, right? Because it happened to the woman. And I saw this thing on socials the other day, which was fantastic. And they had a university where women were being sexually assaulted by men. And what they did is they ended up going and restricting the women's hours, saying they had to go out in partners and they couldn't go out after this time and all this sort of stuff. And then someone put a petition into the university to say, why don't you just stop men going out after 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock? And there was an uproar. So again, the whole issue around sexual violence, sexual assault, the remedy for that is put on the woman. Watch the way that you dress, cover your drink. Don't go out at night alone. Always have protection. I walk to my car if I'm at nighttime with the keys in between my hands, I could use it as a weapon, right? Always check the back seat before you get in the car. All these things that women done that we've been taught to do over time to keep us safe, when purely you could just say, don't rape someone, don't kidnap someone, don't sexually assault someone. You know, where is the work that's being done in that area to actually prevent it from happening, rather than the onus falling on the potential victim to show up in a way that minimizes happening? And so when you're looking at that woman was assaulted, where did the perpetrator go, right? It's that victim focused language. And then, you know, when it is an intimate partner violence situation, why didn't she leave? If it's a sexual assault, what was she wearing? Or why did she go home with him? How much did she have to drink? You know, well, why didn't she report it straight away? You're trying to find ways that decredit the story, because inherently, without realizing it, men want to see men and they want to support men, right? Men worship men. A lot of women worship men. The white man, historically under patriarchy, has been worshipped. And even if we don't think we worship them now, there's a little bit of us that's been conditioned over time that sits on that internal bias. And for a lot of us, there's awareness around that. We fight it, we change it. But for many, there's not. And they will openly say, I'm not sexist, I don't have a gender bias, yet at the same time go, oh, stop being a pussy, right? Hang on, that's a bit contradictory. So in that aspect of what I was talking about before with the assaulting, notice how quickly the grammatical and moral attention actually moves away from what someone allegedly did to what the women did before, during, or after that, right? And then non-consensual sex is another thing that's being used, right? In that sanitizes and desensitizes sexual violence. So you'll see, oh, you know, happened and it was non-consensual. No, he raped, right? But they very rarely will use that wording and terminology when they're doing the reporting, because by desensitizing something, it creates less emotional reaction and less outroar. And if everyone was jumping up and down and having an outroar about this as much as what the minority that I do, the creators that I follow do, it would change, right? But they don't want to incite that within people. And so as we're moving into this space, you know, words, repetition creates associations that then creates the schemas in our brain. So that shortcut of, oh, there was someone that's made an allegation of sexual assault, that schema is, okay, what did she do to contribute to that, right? Without us even recognizing expectations, interpretation of different things, the behavior, the culture. You know, misogynistic language doesn't cause domestic violence or intimate partner violence. Misogynistic language doesn't cause sexual assault. However, it is part of the cultural environment, right, in which beliefs about gender, entitlement, sexuality, power, and violence are learned and reinforced. And it does create a rape culture. It does create an environment where people won't call out the behaviors. Like it's just a joke, right? Joking about those sorts of things create an underlying aspect. They had a research study that they did on some students. They had them come into the room, and half the students were given like a crossword, like a find a word, search a word kind of crossword thing, word puzzle, where they had to find words. And one half of the group was just given random words, and the other half of the group was given words that were related to aging, right? And they timed them as they came out. And the ones that were given the words regarding aging actually had an average of a longer time between point A and point B when they walked out. Right? So it affects our behaviors without us even knowing. That's what priming does. That's what this subconscious element is that I'm trying to talk about. And so it's not just a joke. And anyone that says it's not that deep, oh, it is that deep, right? That's how subconscious programming works. So it's not the jokes that are told, the headlines, the insults, the song lyrics. I will skip songs now that have stuff like that because I don't want that implanted into my subconscious. The romantic movies, oh my goodness, how they programmed me when I was little. The Disney movies, right? Looking for Prince Charming to come and save me. Always, oh, I can change a man. The man turns up all grumpy and then the woman shows him love and then he comes around and he's devoting, priming us women to go, oh, he's got potential. I'll go in and give it a try, right? Not all women, but some women. The compliment, the backhanded compliments, the victim blaming, the passive headlines, the things that people in our family have said, and then the things that we're repeating to ourselves without even considering what that means and how we're actually programming ourselves. And I often use the example of the salt and vinegar chips. And the more I talk about salt and vinegar chips and eating them and the crunch of them and the tanginess on my tongue and those sorts of things, that creates extra saliva in the mouths of the people that are listening to me majority of the time. And so the words that I'm saying are creating a physical response potentially in your body right now. They're just words I'm saying. That's how powerful words are. So if you can imagine the repeated words that we hear all the time describing the things around us ultimately, they are going to change how we think and feel and behave on a subconscious level without us even realizing. And so when you hear a gendered insult, just ask, why is that insulting? And if someone does the joke and it's not funny, you don't have to call them out and go, that was inappropriate. And you just go, oh, can you explain to me what was the joke? Can you explain more? And you'll go, oh, it's just a joke. And I go, yeah, can you explain that more? I can't see where it was funny. Soon we'll pull people out because it's not funny, right? A lot of the time. Or they have to say, oh, I'm putting a woman down. That's the funny part. Is it really? And even if you look at the sitcoms that have been around forever, right? The whole humor around a sitcom, Married with Children, Modern Family, all the ones that I kind of grew up with, are all about the incompetence of the men, the weaponized incompetence of the men. And then when the women get upset about it, they're nags or they're overreacting, right? So we're even programmed from that space to laugh at that thing. That's the joke. Is it really? So when you hear a positive stereotype of that, oh, women are very good, at organizing, who benefits from that belief? When you hear the headline about some sort of violence, who has agency in that sentence? When someone asks what the victim did, why aren't we asking why the person did it, right? And what is with the other person, or what we can do to stop the opportunities for people to do these things? And would we describe the same capability then differently if they were a man? So language matters because representation isn't only about who we see, it's about who we hear, described as powerful, capable, difficult, emotional, desirable, disposable, responsible, or worthy of protection. And we inherit a lot of this language. We didn't consciously choose the associations buried within it, but once we see it, we get to choose whether we keep repeating it. So anyway, thank you for listening in to this episode. I hope you got value from it, and I look forward to serving you again in our next episode.